So, Lone Rider here, and I wanted to talk about lessons from Watchung. Now, I spent 3 years, or nearly 3 years, trying to get mountain peak access here in Union County, New Jersey, at Watchung Reservation. And to quote the late great singer-songwriter Jim Croce, I learned a lot of lessons. They were not the nice kind. And I wanted to talk about one of them today briefly. I learned the dangers of what's essentially a more or less one-party political system. All of the freeholders on the Union County Board of Chosen Freeholders, which is the legislative body at the county level here in New Jersey, in Union County, are Democrats. There's not a single Republican, Independent, anything else among them. They're all members of the same party. All of them. And that makes it really difficult to expect any of them to dissent from the others. So, it's no surprise that often when there's an issue involved and it comes to a vote, it may not be unanimous, but it's usually a majority. And, there's very little chance of changing the way things go because they're all members of the same party, and they not only all therefore have an overall similar political philosophy as far as the relationship of the government to the citizen, etc., but nobody even has an incentive to do something different just out of contrariness because they're a member of a different party. If we had one Republican, one Independent, one whatever, at least you could count on that person maybe not marching in lockstep. But we don't have that. Instead, they're all members of the same party. And by the way, this is something that, my sympathies tend to be more with the Republicans than the Democrats. But on the issue of essentially having a one-party legislative body, I'm always against that, regardless of which party it is, because the idea is it's about intellectual hegemony. It's not so much about which ideas are being forwarded by that hegemony. It's simply about the fact that they're all the same, whichever they are. So if they were all Democrats, as they are, it's bad. If they're all Republicans, potentially it could be just as bad. Maybe in a different way, but just as bad. And the thing here then is that the lesson from Watchung in this particular case is that you want some variety in your government. You want something different, right? You want not all the people to be marching in lockstep. Because when they do that, it's very easy to steamroll over legitimate concerns of the citizen. It's very easy to rush through legislation. It's very easy to just go along to get along and not have anybody ask serious questions. So, lesson from Watchung here is when you have one party controlling everything, whichever party that happens to be, it almost doesn't matter, it can be bad, all right? You don't get the critical examination of government policy that you need. Not because one party is better than the other and having it split up between different political parties will lead to more critical examination of government policy because maybe one party is better than the other on that. Sometimes they are. There are different, usually, generally speaking, there are different policy positions between parties on some issues. But the propensity of each party to just acting as a block is the same regardless of which party you're talking about. So I would have a problem with an all-Republican freeholder board the same way as I'd have a problem with an all-Democrat freeholder board. It just happens that this particular freeholder board is all Democrat. And the thing is, it's not so much that if we had a handful of people from a different party on there that they would question things because that party is, better at assessing the relationship between the government and the citizen and has maybe a more ethical outlook. No. Maybe they'd be just as bad, but they would oppose the other people simply on partisan grounds, which can be useful if it prevents a bad policy from presenting itself and being rushed to the fore. So, in an ideal situation, we'd have different parties represented there, and we'd have different views represented there. And for anybody to make the case for any government policy, they would have to really hash it out, and it would have to be questioned, and they'd have to make a real good case. Instead, it's rubber stamp and see you manana. And like I said, this is one of the things I learned from being involved in the county government for 3 years, going to meetings, going to so many meetings. It hurts my head when I think of all the meetings I suffered through. Not just the ones where I got up and I spoke, because I'm not a big fan of speaking in public. It makes me kind of nervous. I get kind of scared. I did get up at the podium and speak at several of these meetings, at least 3 that I specifically recall. Each time I did it, I had butterflies in my throat. But I did it, as uncomfortable and as unpleasant as it was. I did it because I thought it was something that was important to do. And I wish more people had done it. And if more people had done it, maybe we wouldn't have the government policy we had. Just like if we had more views represented, besides for just one political party filling all the seats, maybe we wouldn't have the government policy we have. But we do. So the lesson from Watchung in this case is, political hegemony doesn't benefit everybody. It's better if you have more than one view represented. Not so much because one view is better than the other necessarily, but because, if for nothing else, out of partisan politics, they'll force each other to make the best case for what policy they want to put forward. Everything will have to be examined in detail. Everything will get questioned, and therefore, everything will come out into the open. And that's sure as hell a better method for government policy than just everybody rubber stamping everything. So, the lesson from Watchung here, one-party dominance is bad, and, having different parties or different views at the very least, or different factions represented within a governing body is potentially its own check and balance. And it's one that we didn't have in Watchung at the county level here in Union County, New Jersey, unfortunately. Lone Rider out.